What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Tournament After Action Reports with me, your host, Joshua Joshi Howard. Today, we're going to be talking about the most recent GT that I went to, and the first one that I'm going to up here in the Pacific Northwest, called the Iron Cage, which was held out in Bremerton, Washington. If you're not familiar with that, don't worry. It's a town just on the peninsula, on the other side of the Puget Sound. So it's a little bit far from where I'm currently living, but ultimately it was a GT that I could go to, so I was able to go out to that one. So before we go too far into this, I'm just gonna say I don't feel like I played this event particularly well. There's a couple of things that I think I did that there's a couple of like decisions that I feel like I made that were probably not as accurate as they generally could have been, and in general, I could kind of tell I was not really comfortable with the list that I was playing and the style that I was trying to emulate. So it's something that if I'm gonna do again, I will have to reconsider how I want to play it. However, the next time I go to a GT, it's probably going to be after the chapter approved mission changes. So we'll see exactly what that ends up doing to how guard plays, if we get any changes, what the lists are going to be looking like at that time. But this was definitely a spot where I think if I had played a list that I had more reps on, I probably would have had more success because I did not have a lot of time to play recently between like the move that I did and the fact that I don't really know the community up here nearly as well. So anyway, I'll go ahead and get that out relatively early. So for this event, I feel like there were a couple of things about the organization of it that could have changed a little bit and it would have made the experience a little bit better. The first one is I'm not really sure why day two was started a whole hour earlier than day one, especially because day one is going to go a lot longer. And by starting at 9 a.m., for some people like me, I had to wake up really early. I had to wake up at like 6:30, which for me, I normally wake up around 10 a.m. a lot of time, so it was just far in order to get to. So that was a bit of an odd decision. The other thing that I was not a huge fan of was we found out when we got to the event that the layout that we were doing on round five was changed in like the morning of. So we found out Saturday morning that round five was going to be moving from one layout to a different layout, which was I really don't like when that happens because it's just some people build their lists. Like I was building my list with the intention of it being better on layout 7, and then that was just taken out of the event. I was not a fan of that at all. However, I do want to say that there were a couple things about the event that I did really enjoy. The first one is that there was a ton of space around every single table. Like, not only could you set up a cart, but even with the carts, you still had space between, so that every single table was individually had space, just like a walk all the way around. So that was really cool. The venue was nice. It was a nice hotel, which was good as well. And overall, like I feel like the event was run pretty well. Having 3 hours and a little bit, I think it was 3 hours and 15 minutes in order to set up the new terrain and everything else made the event fairly relaxed in that regard. I never felt like super pressed for time throughout the course of the event, which was really nice. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look at the list that I was actually bringing to this event. If you're paying attention to the Battle for Salvation event, it looks pretty much identical. I think this is pretty much the exact same thing that Nassim Fouchain took, and also very similar to what Ben Jurek took to that event. I think the big thing for me was I already had like 1850 points of this figured out, and then there's just like the last 150 where I was looking at a couple different options. I took a look at Nassim and Ben's list and was like, well, they both took like the last 150 points in the same way, so I'm just gonna do that. So it's copying a net list, but I had built it, and then it was like, oh wow, it looks identical. So blame me if you need, but regardless, it is one Cadian command squad, a Rogal Dorn commander with the Grand Strategist enhancement, Ursula Creed, 1 unit of 10 Cadian shock troops, 2 units of 10 Catachan jungle fighters, 2 units of 20 Death Corps of Krieg, 2 Tauroxes, 2 Hellhounds with Inferno cannons and multi-meltas, 2 units of Kasrkin with all the fixins, 2 Leman battle tanks with multi-meltas, and 1 LR Exterminator with a plasma cannon. So very standard stuff. I've been pretty convinced on the 2 units of Death Corps of Krieg. They are just really, really good. They're just very powerful, just having 24 up save bodies that you can charge into things, and it's just a lot of OC, very powerful. So I was very happy to switch over to that from the Cadian Command Squad and Ogre Bodyguard that I was running in the past. I think the Cadian Command Squad with an Ogre Bodyguard is still a good piece, but realistically, The big thing about this list that I feel is it's very clearly strong, but it's not quite the playstyle that I normally play. My Kasrkin ended up severely underperforming throughout the course of this event, so it's one of those spots where it's like, is it the Kasrkin's fault? Did I just roll badly? It was a little bit hard for me to parse in the moment as to which version I really would have liked. But anyway, let's go ahead and talk about the games that we were playing. So the first game that we played was Mission F, Burden of Trust, Hidden Supplies, Hammer and Anvil on Layout 1. And one of the big things that you will notice pretty much right away about this is that there are some pretty crushing shooting lines that are kind of available, and so all of this space is really hard to deploy into if your opponent has a lot of shooting. However, that kind of works both ways. If both players are trying to respect their opponent's ability to go first, it's really hard to deploy anything in here, it's really hard to deploy anything in here, so there's a lot of kind of dead space in the actual deployment. The other big thing to remember is that this objective in the middle did not exist. We rolled off as to which direction the hidden supplies were going to go. My opponent won the roll-off, and he decided that our objectives were going to be, go towards the safe side, as opposed to being just like here where they're largely in the open. My round one opponent was Alex, I'm probably going to say this wrong, but Shexnader would be my guess. Great guy, part of the Rain City Witch Pigeons who play up at Waystone Wargaming in Ballard. But it's a fairly normal looking tactical list. You got 2 beast bosses, 1 big mech in mega armor with the can go with flash kits enhancement, 3 big mechs with shock attack guns, 2 units of beast snagas, 1 unit of 10 boys, 4 units of 5 storm boys, the flash kits, 1 unit of Gretchen, 3 units of tank bustas, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 trucks. Fairly normal looking tactical list. You have pretty good shooting. Flash kits are one of the few units in the game that can actually just outright kill a unit of Death Korps of Krieg, just because of their raw volume of shots, as well as the fact that they have full rerolls with sustained and lethal hits. So overall, pretty good looking list. Lots of just OC bombs, lots of just damage that you can do. One of the big things about this list that kind of struggles is that their only real ability to kill tanks consistently is the big mechs with shock attack guns and the tank bustas. And even then, it's kind of up in the air as to whether or not they're going to be killing anything toughness 10 or higher, because it's just, you have like the AP2 damage 3, but like it's an inconsistent number of shots, and the other big thing is that only once per game can I think you make it AP3 with the pulsar rocket is what it's called. But regardless, it's an army that in general will kind of struggle with hole spam. Now, for me, this was one of my kind of nightmare missions, and pulling one of the strongest players at the event right at the beginning was a bit of an issue. For me, this mission was a bit of a nightmare, simply because, in my experience, it is very difficult to control these midboard objectives because they are just so easy to get access to. Like, it is very easy to try and make charges from one of these to the other. These are really hard to control because it's easy to make charges here, and also to make this charge here. So it's very hard to stand on these objectives in ways where you can actually consistently hold them. And the other thing that makes this matchup kind of tough is the fact that the tank bustas, their guns are blast. So going into the Death Korps of Krieg, like, this is actually an army that is pretty good at killing Death Korps of Krieg, and that's a lot of my ability to screen things out in order to have OC. He's got tools that are pretty good at dealing with it. So one of the decisions that happened in this game that I think was interesting, that I don't know like whether or not I liked doing it, whether or not I would do it again, happened right away, because I ended up going first on this one, and I took a Taurox that was stationed like right in here, with a Rogal Dorn here, so that I could still give an order even after a scout moves. Is this Taurox went over here, came up here, and dropped the unit of Kasrkin right out here. And the goal of this was a couple of things. One, I had a unit of Catachan like here and a Hellhound here, and they were both able to kind of hang out on this objective on turn 1. And this rush from the Kasrkin was trying to do a couple of things. The first one was there was like truck, a unit of boys like here, and the Kasrkin went in, and they were going to try and kill one of the trucks that had tank bustas in it, and then maybe do some damage to these boys as like extra damage that we could potentially do. And it did succeed at that. I did kill the truck. The tank busters spilled out, and the boys, like, I killed like 2 or 3 of them. So I got a little bit of the bonus damage there. However, one of the major things about this is it only dealt with like one of the major problems. I think one of the things that I really need to do is that this one had tank busters in it, but this one had flash kits in it. And I think going for this play was okay, but the problem was I chose the wrong truck to go after. The tank busters here, I mean, they just kind of hopped out this way, and I gave them an opportunity to shoot at this Hellhound, which was a mechanical mistake. But the problem was I can kind of deal with the tank busters because they will still just die. But flash kits with that 4-up invul really rely on the truck for mobility to get to where they want to go, and they are also a massive Overwatch threat at the same time. And because I went for the truck with tank busters in it instead of killing the one with flash kits in it, flash kits ended up being a really big problem for me this game. Because what the flash kits ended up doing on, I think it was bottom of 1? Yeah, it was on bottom of 1. The flash kits came out, their truck drove out to about here, and then the flash kits just came out here in a U. And there's a couple things here. So, one, the tank busters were still able to come out this way and do damage to the Hellhound. I had Taurox just hanging out here, and then it was a Hellhound and like a Leman Russ battle tank somewhere over here. These flash kits did enough damage to pick up this Taurox, to kill this Hellhound, with the help of the shock attack gun from somewhere, I don't remember exactly where, and also to kill this Hellhound here. So I lost 2 Hellhounds and the Taurox to damage that the flash kits were able to get because they still had their transport. They were able to get into the middle of the board. But it didn't just stop there. If the flash kits were not able to like get into that position quite as easily, like let's just say the truck was here, I kill it, and the flash kits like spill out here, they still have to, like, they're not going to be able to move nearly as much. Because this right here is 6 inches, they're going to maybe get like a couple of guys here, maybe they shoot like a couple of guys into the Hellhound here, but they should not be able to shoot the Taurox, and they should also like not really do any damage to this Hellhound, because they simply do not have the mobility to get that far. And also maybe one of the flash kits die on like getting out of the truck when it dies. But the other problem is when the flash kits end up being here, I really felt like I needed to deal with this problem. And because I had a unit of 20 Death Corps of Krieg hanging out here after the first turn, when they hopped out in order to try and score area denial here, the flash kits were within 6 right here. So I needed to get rid of them in order to help deal with the area denial problem. But then the flash kits opened up with an Overwatch. And that is just a lot of damage. I think he popped his lethal hits here, and that is just like 40 shots with sustained and lethal, full rerolling. He killed 17 of the Death Corps of Krieg right here. So suddenly, this unit of flash kits ends up trading for like a Hellhound, a second Hellhound, a Taurox, and I have to put a lot of my army into this unit in order to make sure it doesn't do it again. And so I think one of the major decisions that I made incorrectly was I just went for the wrong target, right? I demeched the tank busters. I really needed to demech the flash kits. Other than that, I think there were a couple like small things that didn't go my way in terms of luck. Alex ended up having a lot of units of Orks survive on like 1 or 2 guys. So like there was a Storm Boy that just kind of hung out here for basically like two or 3 turns, just hanging out on that objective. He tagged me with like a guy here that I had like 2 Leman Russes punching him, and he just didn't die for like 2 turns, which was really unfortunate. So I just was not able to get like primary. I wasn't able to control that part of the board as much. I wasn't able to control the objective in the ways that I really needed to. And of course, this Hellhound over here probably shouldn't have died if I targeted the right thing with my Kasrkin, but also probably just shouldn't have died in terms of like the damage that was going into it. But overall, I mean, the game was still ended up being very close, even with the couple of mistakes that I made. The end score for this one ended up being a 52-58. I think we both missed out on a couple of points looking at the actual scoreboard because I definitely at least protected my home turn 2 going into turn 3, and Alex protected his home going into turn 3 as well. So I think we both are supposed to have 2 more points, so I probably supposed to have 54 to 60, but ultimately it still would have been the same difference in total points going through. So really fun game, really close game. End up using a lot of the clock on this one actually, just because we both have like so many models and so many activations to try and figure out. So really enjoyed that one. Alex ended up going on to win the GT. So when you lose to the guy who wins the event, there's only like so much that you can do about it. But either way, great opponent, great time. He was my favorite opponent of the event, and we ended up getting lunch later that day. So really fun overall. For round 2 is a very different experience. For round 2, we were playing on Mission K, which is Scorched Earth, Stalwarts, Search and Destroy, and we were playing it on Layout 2. For this one, I ended up playing up against James Kelly, or Bob A. Fett, and he was bringing a bit of a wonky Ultramarines Gladius list. So I had Marnius Calgar with Uriel Ventress, 1 unit of Intercessors, 1 unit of Assault Intercessors with jump packs, a Brutalis Dreadnought, Company Heroes, 1 3-man Eradicator squad, a Land Raider Redeemer, Outrider squad, a Predator Annihilator with the Twin lascannon, the 1 unit of Scouts, a Stormspeeder Hammerstrike, a Storm Raven Gunship, and a Vindicator. And this is not a strong Ultramarines Gladius list. James was there for one thing and one thing only. What he wanted to do was he wanted to take his Brutalis Dreadnought, put it inside the Storm Raven, Rapid Ingress it on turn 2, and then send it at your home objective. And if he did that, he was very happy. Spoiler alert, that did not happen this game. I'm going to give you guys the cliff notes on this one, because this one was not a very tactically deep game. James was a fun guy to play with, had a great attitude, was apparently pretty big in the Star Wars Legion, and I think he said the X-Wing community before that. But I'm going to just take you through like the things that I killed on the turns that died. So on turn 1, James went first. He took his Vindicator, and he moved it up to here. He had his Land Raider Redeemer here. It was empty, and it just stayed still. He had his Predator start like here, and then it moved to like here. And in the bottom of one, I killed the Land Raider, and I killed the Vindicator. Basically for free. On turn 2, the Predator moved onto this objective. Marnius Calgar and friends went from being here to coming out. I think they killed like a Hellhound and some Catachan. Scouts that were here came out to here. And in the bottom of 2, I killed the Scouts. I killed Calgar and friends. And when he rapid ingressed the Storm Raven over here, I also killed that. And then the Kasrkin that were hiding behind this wall in a Taurox hopped out here, and they killed the Predator. So, in 2 turns, that was the Vindicator, the Land Raider Redeemer, the Storm Raven, the Predator, Calgar and friends, the Scout Squad, and then the Brutalist Dreadnought was just stranded over here. The game pretty much ended right away. After 2 turns of that, I think he played 1 more turn where like Brutalis just like came out and like munched on some Kasrkin. He dropped like the Eradicators over here because they had Deep Strike from Uriel Ventress. The Intercessors came out and they killed like the Kasrkin over here. But after that, we just kind of talked it out. It was a fun experience. My opponent was fun to play against, and it seemed like he was having a good time the entire time, but it was not a particularly tactically interesting game. This game, of course, was not close at the end. I ended up winning this one 95 to 38, scoring 50 primary and Scorched Earth, and only missing out on some secondaries towards the end simply because my opponent had kind of run out of units. And I happened to draw like some kill secondaries towards the end of the game where I just wasn't able to score them because there was nothing to kill. It was a good time. Talked to James a couple more times throughout the rest of the event, and he seemed like he was having a great time trying to get after that wooden spoon. For round 3, we ended up playing on Mission C, which was Lidgepin, Fog of War, Tipping Point, and we played this one on Layout 4. For this one, I ended up playing up against Ryder and his Adeptus Mechanicus, an army that I do not get to see very often. It was in the Halo's Creed Battleclade. So this included Belisarius Call, a Tech Priest Manipulus who hangs out with Breachers, 2 units of 10 Rangers, 1 unit of 10 Vanguard, 2 individual Iron Strider Ballistari, the Laser Chickens, 1 big unit of Cataphan Breachers, 2 units of 5 Bats, the Taurox Skystalkers. I think these are the move, shoot, move ones. 1 unit of Sicarian Infiltrators, 2 units of Sicarian Ruststalkers, 3 of them, 2 5-mans and 1 10-man. 2 Scorpius Disintegrators, which are like the transport. They're not a transport, but they look like the transport, and they have like 3 lascannons and like 3 rockets. And then 1 unit of 3 Sidonian Dragoons. So these are not laser chickens, but taser chickens. So if you haven't played up against Halo Creed before, it's a little odd because you basically just get to pick your like Conqueror versus like Protector Doctrina or whatever they're called. And then you can also give like a couple things like bonus move. I think one of them is like advance and charge, which are the ones that you tend to see. But this army just goes pretty fast, is one of the major things that it does. And it can go even faster if you are surrounded by things that are like battle lines. So having Skitarii in the right places, and apparently Belisarius Call like has the battle line keyword. And another thing that's kind of annoying about playing against Adeptus Mechanicus is like every single time I would go to shoot at something, I'd have to be like, does this thing have stealth? Does this thing have stealth? Does this thing have stealth? Am I -1 to shoot at this? But a couple of like big keys about this matchup that I think are true, having only played it like the one time, is respecting the Cataphan Breachers, because they are infantry, despite the fact that they look like they probably would have the mounted keyword, so they can go through walls. You can make them move faster, and they have like re-rolls and can get crit 5 lethals. So they just do a lot of damage too. Like they pick one thing, it's like that thing I want to dead, and they can usually do that. The other big thing is this list has like a fair number of like lascannon and like similar kind of weapons, which makes it very odd overall in order to actually go for the things that you're trying to go for. Where sometimes like you'll just kill vehicles just kind of out of nowhere, and sometimes you just won't kill those same vehicles because lascannons are low number of shots, which are very high variance. But this game was kind of interesting because it was very hard for either of us to attack our opponent's natural objectives, simply because of the way like the game shaped out. So I ended up going second this game, and almost right away I put like a unit of Catachan here, and then I put a Hellhound here so it could sabotage. And then I had a unit of Death Korps of Krieg have like a guy here, but they're also stringing out like all the way over here. So I put a ton of OC on here on turn 2, or excuse me, in the bottom of 1, so I could be very confident I was going to get it, and also that the Hellhound could pull sabotage off successfully without dying. Which this is basically like one of the only places it could have been where it could have safely done sabotage. On the other side of the board, I ended up committing like a Taurox with Kasrkin and like a Legion battle tank, and I think Catachan scouted up to here relatively early on. And this is the first time that the Kasrkin underperformed, not because of my error, but just because they just rolled badly. Meanwhile, on the other side of the board, Ryder had put like the infiltrators here, and there's like a unit of Skitarii that he had stretched out over here. I don't remember exactly what they were trying to do. I think they were trying to screen at the same time. But what I ended up doing is I took my Kasrkin and the Taurox, and I put the Taurox on the objective, and I put just one on here because of the way that the terrain was actually really far here. Like this wall went like almost all the way to the edge. So I was not able to put if I wanted to put guys on the point, the guys that were on the objective were not going to be able to see my opponent's models. And so I unfortunately tried to get my Kasrkin to shoot at the infiltrators with the idea that I was going to kill enough of them such that my opponent would just die, and I would have enough OC on the point afterwards. I could potentially have 4, so as long as I killed most of the infiltrators, I could at least tie my opponent on this objective. The Legion battle tank also came over here, but because the wall was so large, the Legion battle tank was only really able to see like one infiltrator and then also shoot at the Skitarii. But this is one of the first times that the Kasrkin just whiffed like completely for me. So I was in a position where I could have 4 OC on my opponent's command phase if the Kasrkin swapped their order going into the second battle round to OC. So I could have the 2 from the Taurox and then the 2 from the one guy, the Kasrkin. The problem was my Kasrkin just completely whiffed. The melta mine didn't go off, and when they shot everything into the infiltrators, I only killed 2 of them, which meant that there were still 3 of the infiltrators left alive, as well as one of the Scutari. Because when the battle tank shot at the Scutari, they killed, like, the battle tank killed like 6 of them, but Ryder was ultimately. But Ryder chose to use like the insane bravery, I think, pretty early on in order to make sure that he held onto that objective and got the extra 5 points there. And those are 5 points that he probably shouldn't have had because the Kasrkin just didn't do damage. I hit like 2 of my plasma shots. The melta shots like didn't connect, and then he just didn't. He wasn't failing saves against the rest of it. So it was really unfortunate. The damage that the Taurox plus the Kasrkin were not doing to this unit. Then I got a little concerned because immediately after that, Ryder set up one of the laser chickens and one of the lascannon boats over here, and the lascannon boat just killed the Luminous battle tank. So my ability to contest my opponent's natural collapsed almost instantly. The Kasrkin were pretty much cleaned up, and the Catachan were pretty effectively zoned from being able to go onto the objective ever again because my opponent had too much melee. I was never going to be able to stand on the objective without charging my opponent. So the game became very concerning pretty quickly. On my turn 2, I killed Belisarius Call and like the big unit of Ruststalkers that had come out into the middle so I could get Storm Hostile and Area Denial. But there was still an active unit of Breachers over here. He still had both of his gunboats active over here, and his Taser Chickens had set themselves up such that they were ready to start running around over here. Or potentially go this way if they wanted to. But losing the Luminous battle tank, losing my ability to contest my opponent's natural expansion, meant that I was not sure how much ability to control the board state I was really going to have. However, because Ryder had committed so much of his forces to come down this way, it meant that I had a lot still in the tank ready to go this way. And on my turn 3, I stopped bouncing. From this point, I realized if we're just going to get into just a raw shootout, it's probably going to go fairly even. But if I kill my opponent's ability to score, if I kill all of my opponent's ability to actually play the game, it's okay if his gunboats that are just over in this corner over here just kill a Lehman Russ or a Rogal Dorn every turn, because they're not going to be scoring a lot of points for him. And I took my Luminous battle tank that was in reserve, and I think I rapid ingressed it here, and then it moved this way in order to shoot the Cataphan Breachers that had ended up over here. I had a Taurox with some surviving Catachan and Kasrkin just hanging out here that also followed it up, that were able to do like containment late in the game, to do it on this board edge and this board edge. And because I was able to clean out the Breachers and most of the chickens, most of Ryder's forces were just concentrated in this part of the board, which meant that they weren't holding the home effectively for Linchpin, and they weren't able to project a lot of threat into my side of the board. And so this game was a little bit unusual in the fact that I won the game by pushing towards my opponent's home objective instead of being able to actually play for my opponent's natural. Once I stopped bouncing this game, it stopped being that close. I was really worried on turn 2 when I just like lost a Luminous battle tank kind of out of nowhere. But the end score for this one ended up being 92-60. And Ryder was another one of my favorite opponents that I played throughout this event. Just a really chill guy overall. And we ended up talking a fair amount throughout the rest of the event. So a lot of fun playing up against Ryder. He said he had a lot of opportunity to play up against new armies for the first time. But he was a decent player, and I hope to see him again at another event. So then we get back to round 4. And for round 4, we're playing Mission O, Terraform, Stalwarts, Crucible of Battle, and we play this one on layout 1. My opponent for this one was Sean Gallagher, and he was playing a bit of an offbeat tactical brigade list. And by offbeat tactical brigade, Sean was joking that this probably should have been a Warhorde list, and frankly, I agree. It had Mozrog, a Beast Boss on Squigosaur, only one big mech with a shock attack gun with the mech captain, so this guy was the one who was joined to the flash kits, 3 War Bosses, 1, 2, 3 units of 10 boys, 2 units of 5 Storm Boys, 2 units of 6 Breaka Boys that were both led by War Bosses. Only one of the units of boys was led by War Boss. 1 unit of Flash Kits, 2 units of Gretchen, 1 unit of 4 Squickhawk Boys, 1 Mech Guns, which is the one that you have to like roll to see like what kind of profile you're shooting with, and 4 trucks. And if you're looking at this and going, Josh, where are the tank bustas? So was I. I just assumed that this list had tank bustas in it, and it didn't. And the other thing that I assumed is I'm so used to seeing the whatever other Big Mech is. Alex had its Big Mech and Mega Armor. I I assumed that the big mech that he had attached to the flash kits was the one that gave them the 4-up invul. And it wasn't. So I just kind of looked at this list and was like, I don't think this list can kill me. And honestly, I was kind of right. So Terraform has a pretty big problem in the way that it's built up. The way it works in Pariah Nexus is if you go first and you start a terraforming objective and your opponent can't deal with you because of the tempo advantage that comes from going first and the ability to control where your opponent is on the board going first, if you get a terraform off on turn 1, that is an instant 8 points that you just get for yourself because you then score 2 points per turn for the rest of the game. And one of the things I had looked at in my preparations for this was making sure I could set up a unit of Krieg that was like here, making sure that I could 9-inch move onto this, and also a Hellhound somewhere in here that could 10-inch move onto this. And so suddenly, if I just say, hey, look, I have a big unit of OC with Krieg, and another unit that is very durable that you're going to struggle to kill in the Hellhound, one of them should be able to do terraform against almost any army. You basically just say, whichever one of these is harder for my opponent to kill, that one is going to start a terraform. And the other big thing about this is because of how long this firing lane is, if you park like a Leman Russ over here, not a lot of people are going to be willing to deploy things in the open, especially if they don't have the ability to countershoot your Leman Russ. So because of that, Sean had most of his army. He didn't actually have anything here. Sean put his army fairly naturally. A lot of it was in here, and there was some of it like over here and in here, whatever. The point was, the distance from here to there is a lot closer than here to there. It's an extra like 4 or 5 inches. So because of that, I just got a terraform off on my natural expansion right at the beginning of the game, and I never had a turn where I didn't hold this expansion for the rest of the game. The battle lines for this one were more or less drawn something like this. I couldn't put a lot of pressure into this part of the board, but I could threaten to take this away from him. I could ask questions about how he was holding his natural expansion, and he could never really ask those questions of me. Now, one of the big things that kind of took me by surprise this game is Sean also put his flash kits out somewhere in here. And with my big unit of Krieg, like over here, it's kind of hanging out, I gave Krieg the inspired command in order to have take cover. And then I also ended up using go to ground. And so with this Hellhound here, very few of the models here actually got bonus shots going into this unit. And the other big thing is that my opponent didn't realize that in order to actually have a good chance of full wiping the Krieg unit, you needed to pop the lethal hits. If you pop the lethal hits, you have a pretty darn good chance of actually just wiping the Krieg unit. But he didn't. So this Krieg unit, I think it lost like 11, so I still had like 9 guys left in the unit. Whereas you have to remember the other thing when I was playing up against Alex earlier, where I had the flash kits in a similar position, overwatch my unit of Death Corps of Krieg over here, that killed 17 in Overwatch. So there's just like a colossal difference here between the amount of damage that Sean was doing as compared to what I saw Alex do. The other big part of that is Sean chose to actually use the Overwatch when I took this Hellhound and moved it out, and that's when he popped his lethals. And he did a lot of damage. I think he did like 8. I think he did 8. He like almost killed the Hellhound. But having a 2+ save is still really good. So I just saved a lot of the lethal hits that he was generating. But one of the things I realized pretty rapidly when I started shooting at it, I had like my Dorn propped up here. It moved out so that it could see. I had a Leman Russ over here pop out so it could see. I thought it was going to take both these tanks to kill this unit because I'm so used to this unit having a 4-up invul and shooting. Or maybe always? I don't know. I don't charge flash kits very often. It didn't. So the Rogal Dorn killed like 9 of them by itself. I was like, oh, I have killed you so efficiently with my army that the LR Exterminator that I had here that like popped a tread out such that it could potentially shoot at them didn't have a target because it just died. That was kind of how a lot of this game ended up going. I was able to use like Catachan screen, and then I took a unit of Krieg and they just like ran out here to create this massive screen, such that my opponent could never really get access to my home objective, and also I was constantly threatening to put enough OC onto my opponent's natural so he could never get a terraform off. And this game ended in a little bit of an odd way. And I'm kind of curious what everyone else's thoughts are. So we get to a point where I had set up a clock, and I set up a little bit more time than like the 3 hours. So we each had like hour 35 or something on the clock at the beginning because we got there early enough. The terrain was already set up. We were able to go through the armies like and actually get started like right as the round started, which normally gives you that 15 minutes to like set up terrain. But anyway, we get to the point in this game where Sean clocks out at the end of his third round. I still have about 25 minutes left on my clock. Even in his like third round, I was starting to give him, without saying anything, like I was intentionally leaving the clock on me for things that definitely should have been on him. Now, bear in mind at this point, like I have thoroughly controlled the game. There's no way that I'm not winning this game. But I just go, hey man, I just want to let you know, we're running out of time in the round. Your clock's basically over, so you're only going to be able to do a couple of things in your round 4. And he just goes, nope, and keeps playing. And I was so taken aback by this that I just kind of let it keep going on. And so I'm kind of curious like what everybody else's thoughts are in these kind of positions, because I had already won the game pretty much no matter what. And so just like the nope, I'm not going to follow the clock was like, what? I don't really know what to say about that one. So we kind of like talked it out, whatever. The end score ended up being 94 to 58, so it was like never really in question like what the outcome was going to be. But I don't know. If you guys have had similar stories, like let me know down in the comments and then we can go from there. But I just thought it was weird. So I kind of wanted to share that with you guys to kind of gauge the reaction of like what other people feel about that kind of thing. Anyway, moving on, let's go ahead and talk about round 5. So we get to this position, and I am pretty confident looking at how like the tiebreakers are set up, because I think it's battle points as first tiebreaker. If I win my round 4, I probably get second. And round 5 is mission A, take and hold, raise banners, tipping point. And like we mentioned at the beginning, it was originally layout 7, and ended up being changed to layout 2. I ended up playing this one up against James and his Chaos Knights, and it is a exact standard Chaos Knights are used to seeing. 1 Wardog Stalker with a sticky enhancement, 6 Brigands, 6 Carnivores, and there were 2 Mortar hats somewhere in here. The rest of them were Stubber hats. And he said the only reason why he had the indirect hats at all is because he ran out of heavy Stubbers and really wanted his army to be WYSIWYG, which I respect. For this game, I'm going to first tell you about how I got unlucky, and then I'm going to follow up with mistakes that I made in this game. So over the course of this game, I end up having a total of 3 Kasrkin units, because I end up bringing one of them back. So in this game, I end up taking the Tauroxes and kind of throwing them at my opponent in different points of the game in order to try and deal with Chaos Knights. And normally, Into Kasrkin is supposed to do 3 or 4 mortal wounds on the Melta Mine when you throw it, and then you're supposed to do an additional like 4 or 5 damage with your Plasma, your Melta, and your Sniper Rifle, and like your lasgun shots. Throughout the course of this game, my Kasrkin ended up doing, I think it's a total of 2 damage, including Melta Mines, throughout the course of the game. So, the first unit Kasrkin that I took was, this was bottom of 1. This Taurox scouted up to, like, right in here. And then James had a, I don't remember, it was a War Dog of some kind here. And in bottom of 1, this Taurox came out over here, dropped the Kasrkin off onto the point, and attempted to shoot at War Dogs. There was 2 of them here. I set it up such that I could throw a Melta Mine into either of them if I wanted to. This unit of Kasrkin did 0 damage in the shooting it actually shot. Like, it did not do any damage in its shooting. Then, when I threw the Melta Mine into a War Dog, it did go off, but it did 2 mortal wounds. So suddenly, this 175 point package did 2 mortal wounds to Chaos Knight. That feels pretty bad. That's not good. The other unit of Kasrkin that was in a Taurox happened on bottom of 2, because I had the Taurox kind of hanging out here, and then James ended up putting a Chaos Knight of some type here, Taurox came out, dropped Kasrkin off. These Kasrkin shot at this. Again, 0 damage. Then they threw their melta mine, and I rolled a 1. So this unit Kasrkin did 2 on a melta mine. This unit Kasrkin did 0, including the melta mine. The other one, this is kind of me being hyperbolic, but the other unit of Kasrkin ended up coming in when I used reinforcements, and it came over here, and it never really did any damage because it just hung out in his backfield for a little bit, sitting on his home objective, and then it did a sabotage. So it did end up scoring me like 11 points just existing. But the fact that the first unit Kasrkin just completely whiffed and did absolutely no damage was really brutal. And in a 1-point loss, the fact that like 300 points of my army did almost nothing is really hard to play around. Now, that's the bad dice. I do want to tell you about a couple of mistakes that I actually made, and this is part of feeding into things that I feel like I wasn't doing quite as well. The first mistake I made was I was going second against Chaos Knights. Because of that, you should expect to hold only your home going up against Chaos Knights in terms of actually scoring primary. They're going to try and suppress your score really, really hard, especially going first. So the first mistake that I made is I took an opportunity on bottom of 1. I had a unit Catachan that was hanging out here, and I had a Hellhound that was somewhere in here. And the Catachan ended up taking their 9-inch move and standing on this point. And the Hellhound also took its 10-inch move and stood on this point. That's a mistake. All I need to do in order to get my opponent to come play with me is I need to put one of these units on the board. I need to put one of these units on this objective so that my opponent has to stand on it in order to stop me from doing anything. It's probably supposed to be the Hellhound that's going to come out and just stand on the objective, because the guys, if they're ever in a position to just like stand on the objective like over here, that can out OC one of the War Dogs just because they are 20 OC compared to a War Dog's 8, or 20 OC compared to a two War Dogs 16. But what ended up happening is the Hellhound ended up dying, and also the Catachan. So I just threw away an entire unit for free. The other mechanical mistake that I made in this game in terms of like actually executing on the strategy was I had a Legion Rush battle tank that was like here, and it just like walked out, and it ended up taking fire from like 3 brigands that were just kind of hanging out over here. This battle tank didn't need to go that far. It could have stuck its nose out like right in here, and that would have put it within 18 of any War Dog on this point. But because I let it get farther forward, I ended up allowing James to put more of the thermal spears, the super meltas, into the Leman Russ than I really needed to. So I ended up losing a Leman Russ in a position where it should have still been alive. Or at least it probably should have still been alive. And in general, I think my Leman Russes were standing too close to my opponent most of the time, such that they were taking just like maybe an extra brigand here, an extra brigand there. I killed most of his carnivores relatively quickly, and just used Death Korps of Krieg to just touch all of his brigands as much as I could. But they still go from hitting on 2s to hitting on 3s, so they're still fairly consistent in terms of like the damage output that they have. But overall, James was able to put a lot of pressure on this game, and even though I outscored him by a lot on secondary points, he is able to dictate primary for most of the game. I unfortunately, kind of like I said, remember how I said like I lost this unit of Catachan really early on? This unit of Catachan probably could have spent the entire game hiding behind that wall, such that it could just run out and stand on this at the end of the game. Because I ended up taking like a unit of Death Korps of Krieg that was here. They ended up charging like a Stalker and like a Brigand here. I had a big unit of Death Korps of Krieg here. They came out and like touched like 3 Brigands at one point. So there was never really threat going on to these Catachan other than like the 2 mortar hats. And so just having those Catachan ready to go at the very end of the game, just stand on one of these objectives, probably would have won the game for me. But unfortunately, I threw that unit away relatively early on, and because of that, I only ended up scoring, and because of that, I only ended up scoring 10 points at the very end of the game. The one other really interesting mechanical thing was at one point, there was a War Dog Brigand or something right about here. And the only thing that mattered at the end of the game was whether or not I was going to be able to take my unit of like Ursula Creed and her remaining friends. If I could get a charge off into this brigand and orb walk my way around onto this objective, I could hold 3 and get a 15 at the very end. Unfortunately, the charge that I went for didn't end up working. I ended up using Creed's free reroll to try and charge it again. Still didn't end up working. But overall, the game ended up being a 1 point difference, and James was a great opponent to play against. He ended up winning the game 80 points to 79, and he ended up getting second at the event. So overall, I have some mixed feelings about this event, and they most have to do with how I played. One, I don't think I played very well at this event. Kind of like I said, I didn't have the reps on the list that I wanted to in order to have as much success as I feel like I probably should have. I feel like if I was playing well on a list that I was well prepared on, I think I could have actually won this event. But I didn't. And so it kind of goes to show just like having those reps and making sure you're in good form going into these events is a really big deal. I think if I was playing on point, I would have done well. But at the same time, I only lost to the person who got first. I only lost to the person who got second at the event. So overall, still had a good time. Still had a lot of good games that I really enjoyed. So if you're on the fence about whether or not you want to go to tournaments, I would say go to them anyway. You're going to have a lot of fun. You're going to get to play a lot of good games of Warhammer. And you'll get to see all the cool stuff that's going on. I am looking at other GTs that I'm trying to go to. I am signed up for Tacoma Open, which is happening in mid-July. So I'll see anybody who's going to that at that event. And then I think I'm going to try and go to one more towards the end of June. So I'll keep you guys updated on what the plans are for that. Anyway, thank you guys for watching this one, and we'll see you guys all next time. Bye-bye.